Hello and welcome to the book show on Diversity TV. I'm Ava Colby, a writer of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. My Facebook and website are Ava Colby Books. And today I'm going to talk to you about a book called The Bottom Billion by Paul Collier. So in this book, he talks about the causes of ongoing poverty for nations in the world. For example, if we look at the continent of Africa, we have all these borders that were artificially created by white colonists. And then what you notice when you look at certain countries is that they are landlocked, they have very limited resources, and they probably have a bunch of tribes that were put together that do not get along with each other, and they have to struggle forwards as a nation trying to make that work. And those are some of the reasons why there is poverty there, because those countries would not have formed naturally had they been left alone to decide their own borders. So even when they get independence, they have these ongoing problems. He also looks at a lot of the corruption that is in the nonprofit industry. One of his examples was to point out how little money donated to charitable efforts in developing nations actually gets to the people it's supposed to help. It tends to line the pockets of the people along the way so that very little of these resources actually get to the people who need the help. Now, I come from a working class background, and I did a lot of volunteer work over the years in places like Foundation for Religious Freedom when I lived in Los Angeles, California, right around Portland in Oregon, which relates to these writing workshops. Many of them are done for free, and they're meant to help at-risk communities like veterans with PTSD or domestic violence survivors. Maybe homeless runaways as well, because we have a lot of those in Oregon, because the laws are more sympathetic to those particular people than in other parts of the country. So a lot of people come from outside of Oregon to live there. And NARAL, before I decided that, frankly, the group seemed too pro-abortion rather than pro-choice for my particular values. UNESCO in Ireland, which is an environmental group, and others that did a lot of volunteer work. And when I finally found a way to go to college, I just assumed I was going to go on and be in the nonprofit industry and work for those good causes that I believed in. And it was largely this book that opened my eyes to the corruption, the misuse of funds, and the self-centeredness that is throughout the nonprofit industry. And it left me for a time unsure of what work to pursue. It was very eye-opening about a lot of these activists who are, some of them less focused on what the goals are for the charitable efforts and more concerned with maybe going to the country that's more fun to go to and has more stuff to do and is more of a tourist stop, rather than maybe the country that really needs more help. So it was very disheartening to me, crushingly so at times, but reality must be faced. It needs to be dealt with. And fortunately, I had this great experience after my dad and I lost the family business with the economic times of 2008, 2009. We had to find other work. We made a friend who got me a job supervising a crew of janitors and being a building supervisor. And most of the employees that I supervised were from different South American countries. And the long and short of it is I eventually turned our lunch break into a language exchange. And I tried to learn Spanish and got almost nowhere, as always, but they said I was very good at teaching them English, and I really enjoyed teaching them English and helping them in that way, because a lot of them wanted to learn English and to better themselves, but they didn't have the time or the money to go to English language classes and learn it. And they would face a lot of that discrimination of people saying, oh, they should just learn English, as if it's that easy to just learn one of the most difficult languages in the world. English is an amalgamation of a lot of different languages, actually. That's part of why it's so difficult. So you don't just like learn it like you breathe the air and you're going to breathe in these English words. It's actually much more difficult than that. So I was really happy to help them out with that, and I enjoyed the teaching. So as I finished my college degree, I got a Celt English language teaching certificate, which qualifies you to teach in all private sector colleges. That means not state-owned, private industry, English language schools in the entire world. If you've got your degree and your CELTA, or Trinity, you're good to go. And I really had a good time teaching all these students from all over the world. I taught students from Brazil, Mexico, Japan, China, Mongolia, Chile, Colombia, Bolivia, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Russia, France, Italy, Spain, and Greece, and I loved my job. Well, I should say I loved it after a few months, because I was terrible at it at first. I had no clue what I was doing, and when you're a brand new teacher, nobody helps you figure it out. You just get thrown off in the deep end, and it's an absolutely awful experience. It feels more like hazing than being taught a professional career. But after a few months and I started to get the hang of it, then I really enjoyed it. And over the next year or two, I really came to love it. So fortunately, I had a backup plan, because this book really opened my eyes to a lot of the problems in the nonprofit sector. So this book is an absolute knockout, and it is written in a very accessible way. It's not too esoteric or anything like that. He really makes things very clear and breaks down the issues and the causes of them in a very clear way that's very easy to get into. So I would definitely recommend it for anyone who wants to understand our world the way it is now better, or anyone who is really interested in making the world a better place, really wants to see things improve for people all over the world. Because the fact of the matter is, just throwing money, bleeding money out into charities is not going to do anything if the charities are not run properly, and if by constantly putting out aid money you actually end up crippling local economies, because people can't start their own businesses if everything is being given away for free. That's why, for example, Finca, that does a charity that does microfinance loans to women entrepreneurs in developing nations, is a much better approach, because they are able to stimulate their local economy. These women will hire men to do some work for them as well, and these mothers always then make sure that their kids go to school. Finca has had really good success rates in what it's doing, and that's really a way to go, because it's much more accountable about what exactly is being done with the money. You have to be very, very careful anytime you're giving away free money or free anything, to make sure it's used for what it's actually supposed to be used for, what its intended purpose is. So we will have a better world if we delve into these issues head on and don't just blindly follow a script. For example, oh, let's just keep throwing money at this. Well, that's blindly following a script. Are we thinking critically about it? Is the money getting sucked into bureaucracy? Is it actually being used for what it's supposed to be used for? What's our evidence? How can we prove that it's actually helping the people it's supposed to, and not just lining people's pockets along the way? These are issues that we have to get into. We can't just do the blind and lazy thing of throwing money at something that says it's charitable and then pretending we have any clue that it has actually made a difference in people's lives like it was supposed to. So if we don't think critically about all of this, we are never going to improve anything. So I'm going to read something from the introduction the author wrote for the book. For the past few years, much of my work has been on civil war. I wanted to understand why conflict was increasingly concentrated in low-income Africa. Gradually, I developed the notion of the conflict trap. It shows how certain economic conditions make a country prone to civil war, and how, once conflict has started, the cycle of violence becomes a trap from which it is difficult to escape. I realized that the conflict trap was one explanation for the countries now at the bottom of the world economy, but it was not the whole story. Malawi has been conflict-free for its entire post-independence history, yet it still has not developed. Neither have Kenya and Nigeria, countries on which at different stages in my career I wrote books, and which looked neither like Malawi nor like each other. Nor do I believe that poverty itself is a trap. These development failures occurred against a backdrop of global development success. Poverty is something that most people are managing to escape. I don't know what he means by that. Since 1980, World poverty has been falling for the first time in history, nor was it just a matter of Africa. Elsewhere, there were also development failures. Countries such as Haiti, Laos, Burma, and the Central Asian countries, of which Afghanistan has been the most spectacular. A one-size-fits-all explanation for development failure doesn't ring true against such diversity. Part of the reason single-factor theories about development failure are so common is that modern academics tend to specialize. They are trained to produce intense but narrow beams of light. However, in my career, I have written books on rural development, labor markets, macroeconomic shocks, investment, and conflict. And for a while, I was working for Joe Stiglitz, who really was interested in everything and had something ingenious to say about much of it. This breadth has its advantages. Eventually, I came to see that 4 distinct traps explain the countries now at the bottom. Between them, they account for around 1 billion people. If nothing is done about it, this group will gradually diverge from the rest of the world economy over the next couple of decades, forming a ghetto of misery and discontent. The problem these countries have are very different from those we have addressed for the past 4 decades in what we have called developing countries. That is virtually all countries besides the most developed, which account for only 1/6 of the Earth's people. For all this time, we have defined developing countries so as to encompass 5 billion of the 6 billion people in the world. This is obviously from a few years ago, but it's still good information. But not all developing countries are the same. Those where development has failed face intractable problems not found in the countries that are succeeding. We have in fact done the easier part of global development. Finishing the job now gets more difficult. Finish it we must, because an impoverished ghetto of 1 billion people will be increasingly impossible for a comfortable world to tolerate. And I would say that by lacking resources such as education in these other parts of the world, you cannot have everyone develop their full human potential. You don't know how much potential these people have that we're missing out on as an entire human population because they do not have the tools they need to attempt to achieve their full potential. So that is my recommendation this time. Thank you for watching the Book Show and Diversity TV, and we will see you next time.